back. We're ready to go. I'm going to talk about writing reviews today. How are folks doing? We are on lesson 29 of 29. This is the last level 2 lesson. There are going to be a couple short videos on Thursday. That's what time is. Just covering like what are the steps for getting your certifications for Apprentice L1 and L2, how you do those things, and then another one which is what's an endorsement, how to write a good endorsement, both for stores who are like, how do I write an endorsement, how can I endorse a candidate well, as well as for folks who are going to L2 and are going to start writing endorsements for L1, what does that mean? Headkin says, aren't you supposed to be traveling as Wolf started 562? No, I leave tomorrow. I leave tomorrow around like noonish. So I've got some time to finish the work that I have here, and then we're in the air, and then we're in the desert. And that'll be, Vegas is always nice and warm. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll answer far too many things. But yeah, we got a couple other folks. We got several folks flying out Thursday. Wolfstrider McFerguson, this is Robo Joe, ST77M. Headkin asks, how much money do you plan on losing on blackjack? $0. Not $0 of my own money. Despite traveling to Vegas like 1 to 3 times a year for like close to the past decade, I don't think I have bet a single dollar in Vegas. Gambling just isn't my jam. I am planning on offering to act as a proxy for some of my friends who do enjoy gambling, so I might lose some of their money, but none of mine. Here Zap says, what are you doing here? Go pack. Packing takes me like 10 minutes at this point. Like, half the stuff that I already need is in my bag because it doesn't get unpacked. Like the belts and the like judge kit and my toiletries kit, those just stay in the bag. They never get unpacked. And so it's just throwing some clothes and we're good to go. Headkin says you're going to have to teach me craps. I mean, I know that one. I know how to play the games. I just don't play those games. Oh, I forgot to transition the scenes again. I always forget to do this. I record a lesson on the large, it's just my face, and forget to transition to back to this for streams. In case you forgot what we're doing here or who I am. But Gentle Giant 303 says Jonah never washes his judge clothes. Confirmed. That's not true. Those aren't part of my judge kit. Those are called clothing, and they're treated differently. Plus, I'm going to get some shirts at the event, so I don't need to bring as many as I normally do, although I will, because undershirts, but, you know. Felfox Hound says GC is this weekend. If by GC you mean Galactic Championships and not Gen Con, yes. If you mean Gen Con is next weekend. So I generally refer to them as Galactics and Gen Con. Excalibur 444, Judge Shirt's going to be at the Galactic merch area? Nope. Shirts are for folks who are on staff, and they are, I don't know if they are specifically branded for this event, but they might be. And they are not, I can almost guarantee you that they are not going to be the same design that we end up making available, in part due to just like what branding we're going to have on them, the design for them. I think we are planning on going a slightly different direction than the Galactics team is going. We didn't have any direct say in that. And so I don't know what the Galactic shirts look like. I have an idea of what we're looking at as options for the generic Judge Program shirts. And we're getting things finalized. And by finalized, I mean looking into it and hammering out details and making sure that we can actually provide product in places where we say we'll provide it. The big one is making sure that we have manufacturers in Europe who can produce shirts using the same blanks we have here in the United States, so that we can get everybody the same cut of shirt, so folks match. I don't have a timeline on that. Wolfstart at 562 says polo shirts. I would have to guess. I believe both Galactics and our final design will be polos. The more buttons you have, the more professional you look, in my opinion. Polos are a good compromise between comfort and accessibility and price and professionalism. Often, a lot of Judge polos have... they're a little bit more breathable. They're not like cottony as much. They're more, I don't want to say plasticky because that's not the right word. I don't know the word for the textile we use. Wolfstar at 562 says 1 button per level. I don't think that's the plan. I know this is a joke. I'm going to answer it seriously. One of the things that I want to avoid is having disambiguators that are visible between judges of certain levels. So if 2 people are floor judges on an event, one of them is a level 4, one of them is a level 1, players should treat those judges the same. We really don't want folks saying, I don't want to talk to you, I want to talk to somebody with 4 buttons, or somebody with like 4 lights on their shirt, or what have you, right? I want it to be role-based, and so floor judge, head judge, good distinction. Floor judge, team lead, head judge, possible. But then, like, if one of the weird things is if we have like, here's a shirt for when you're a floor judge, for being a demo team member, for team leading, for being on sides, for being on the main event as head judge. This is the appeals judge shirt. This is the registration shirt, and this is the scorekeeper shirt, and that's like 7 different shirts. At a certain point, we're just gouging you and being like, yeah, you need 7 different... You don't need 7 different shirts. I don't want us to do 7 different shirts. And so figuring out a good balance of functionality and, like, design, because being able to visually distinguish that's a floor judge, that's a head judge, very valuable information for judges and players, being like, this is the final authority, because there is a difference in authority there. Whereas, like, between 2 floor judges don't want differences. And Hedkin says you can provide me 7 different shirts, Lamau. See, merchandise kits, part of our business model. We're going to sell you the shirts along with some promos and some other neat stuff. Somebody up said, DFN Ray 369 says, I like the Judge Bowling type shirt that you bought. We like those too. However, we don't have the licensing permissions to print that design. And finding blanks, so like the clean shirt that is just the textile without any logos or branding or words on it, of that shirt is really difficult. There are a very small number of companies that print that shirt. And so if we want to have something that is globally accessible, we're going to be looking at something different. And for shirts that are globally accessible, you end up with polos. Gentle Giant 303 says name tags when. Those are on my list. We want to get our logo approved and get some other stuff with the, like, once we're in a good place with a program logo that we can throw on things that is not owned by FFG or Disney, we can start releasing a lot more official products a lot more quickly, because we don't have to go through licensing and verification processes every single time we want to release something. We're just like, hey, we want to do this. Tim, this looks good? Yeah, this looks good. Great, ship it. So I don't know the timeline on that. Right now, Tim and I are neck deep in San Diego Comic-Con, which is this weekend, and Galactics, which is this weekend. I'm neck deep on making sure L2 comes out, along with all of the ancillary features, where I'm working with our developer to make sure that Nexus gets these updates that makes the accessibility of level 2 as high as possible. After Level 2 comes out like after level 1. There's going to be a gap before I start working on L3 content, and I'll be able to work on like quality of life things and pushed him on things like logo and that sort of thing. Mightstone12420 says, has the Datacron Cascade logo been completed? We have a finalized version. One of the things that we want to do is check with FFG and consequently Disney to be just like, hey, you're okay with us using this as our logo and putting it next to your thing in general, so that like we can start to use it for just our things, and then in the future, for example, put it on playmats next to the Star Wars Unlimited logo and that sort of thing. So it's been completed, but it's not been through all of the verification and approvals processes, so I don't want to share it with folks because it might change a little bit before we call it done for real. Yeah. Wasn't planning on talking about merch, but hey, that's what the Ask Me Anything is for. But unless anybody has any other questions, we're going to dive into the lesson. So, today I want to talk... McFerguson says, when do we think L2 stuff will be 100% ready for use? So after Galactics, that's a cop-out answer. Our developer is currently on vacation and comes back over the weekend or on Monday. I'm not available until Monday anyway. We can use placeholder tools to allow folks to submit their events. McFerguson says, I have a notepad up full of Melee links I'm waiting to submit. You need like 3. You don't need a notepad full of them. But that tool should be so we currently have, one of the things that we needed to do was build a tool that allows us to, essentially we needed to create like Google Forms or some form submission tools. Our developer did that. We have that currently active for TOs who are applying for competitive tier status. So if you are a tournament organizer and you've applied for competitive tier status, you've seen what that vaguely looks like. We're going to expand that to include L2, so L2 applications for their competitive events. We're going to include have L2s who are going for the mentorship cert being able to include reviews. We're going to have TO applications and competitive tier TOs. We'll probably also expand it to allow you to add events to your event history, which will eventually show up on your profile. That's a lower priority than getting the L2 stuff done. The L2 stuff's done should be within a week relatively easily. I also want to continue to work on the L2 exam questions, making sure they are on launch, not going to be perfect because it's me going over them. And I'm aiming again to have a pool of 120 to 150 questions. And so while I will have reviewed them several times, there will be errors. The first couple of tests, there's always some feedback that is delivered, that is taken, and reintegrated into the exams. But looking at my calendar, like, the exam should be, like, my hope is that by August 1st, I have both the exam and the tools available for folks to take the exam. If I have the exam available first, like, we're trying to build this so that it is as hassle-free as possible. Like, if we did it so that, like, you submitted to an outside source, like through Google Forms, then I would have to approve it manually before you could take the exam. Building it into the Nexus means that like you don't have to wait for me to like wake up or come back from an event or feel better if I'm feeling sick or whatever it is. You just submit it and it goes. And we'll have some verification procedures to make sure things aren't wildly incorrect, as well as, like, I'm not going to talk about details of verification procedures because the more you talk about them, the less effective they are. But we will, at the very least, be effectively doing spot checks and deck checks where I'll just look at a couple and be like, yep, that seems good, that seems good, that seems good. But I don't want the system to really ever be, you've done everything you need to do and you're waiting on us. And so my goal is August 1st. I can't guarantee that that goal will be hit. Some of the things are outside of my hands. And I still have the L1 updates that I need to get done. And I want to get those done. I don't know why I want to get them done before L2, but it feels correct to get them done before L2. I think it's just so that I have everything from Apprentice to L2 as a complete track when L2 is done. Just makes sense in my head. I know a lot of people are very eager for L2. However, L2 is not required for the Legends of the Forest Planetary qualifiers. So you don't need this certification for anything. We're not telling folks that you need to staff L2s. We're not even, at this point, recommending it because L2s don't exist. And the first events are going to be on the 2nd and 3rd of August. Answering Hedkin's question of does Gen Con count as one event or two, or multi-day events. Multi-day events are single events. They are multiple tournaments, but we are asking for events. For example, somebody who works at Galactics could be assigned to the Galactic Championship for 3 days, and that counts as one event for them. Somebody else could be assigned to, theoretically, the Galactic Championship Friday morning. Then when the event gets small enough, gets shifted to the competitive open side event that has all of the day 2 buy players playing in it. Then on Friday they're assigned to the open, which is event number 3. Saturday afternoon things are slow again, and so they move to sides where things are picking up again. That's event number 4. And then on Sunday they're back on a competitive event, and then that slows down and they go to another thing. And so 2 people who worked had the same level of experience. One got 1 event and the other got 6 events. Similarly, if like you work side events, it's very possible for there to be several scheduled side events in the same day. Some organizers or publishers run what are known essentially last chance qualifiers. Imagine if day 1 of Galactics, instead of being one 2,048 player event, it was instead 16 128 player PQs, right? Because that's effectively what it is. If somebody was working on like last chance planetary qualifiers and they worked all 16 events, that's really not the same experience as working an event and then a month later working another event. The goal of the 2 or 3 events requirements for L1 and L2 respectively is twofold. One, actually different experiences. So possibly working for different tournament organizer, but like different batch of players, different emotional state, just like a bunch of variables that change how the event works. It might be different format, it might be a different store, different tournament organizer, different players, different meta if it's between set releases, right? The other is we want there to be time between point A and point B and point C so that you have time to grow between each of those. Just hammering it is not how quickly can I get to 3 competitive tournaments. It is how much can I learn between these events. The reason we have this number is not to say we want you to answer this many calls. It is we want you to have a breadth of experience. And so working a weekend is one event, and not a breadth of experience. There's also the question of what is my favorite extended universe legacy Star Wars books. Let me see if I can narrow it down to one. Just off the top of my head, there's Darth Plagueis, there's Shatterpoint, there's probably... I think 000 is my favorite of the Republic Commando books, but I love all of them. Order 66, also really good. Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mindor is incredibly funny. That's another one by Matthew Stover, same author as Shatterpoint. Rogue Squadron is great. I think Back to Trap is my favorite out of the Rogue Squadron books. So if I'm picking one from there, it's that one. Iron Fist is probably my favorite out of the Wraith Squadron books, and I think I like that more than Back to War. What else do we have? I mean, obviously the original Thrawn trilogy, the Timothy Zahn books, Heir to the Empire, incredible. Vector Prime, always a good one. One of those? Ooh, Lost Tribes of the Sith, very good. Kenobi, very good. This is just me naming a bunch of books now. But ST77M asks for a timeline on scorekeeping certification lessons. August. I have the basic level lessons like in my inbox waiting for me to review, record, and post. I just have been, when I got them, I was in the middle of L2, and I've been focusing on getting L2 out rather than having like a 2 or 3 week disruption while I do scorekeeping content. I've also shared those with the team over at Melee and gotten some feedback on them to get some improvements, and they gave me a, not a cheat sheet, but a like things the Melee team wishes y'all knew, like melee.gg/player or something like that brings you to the player controller for your most recently started tournament, I think. So like if you are a player registered an event and you're like, hey, I don't know where like how do I input my results, just going melee.gg/player, I'm 90% sure it's that, just brings you straight to the player controller for that specific tournament, which is a feature most people don't know about and is one that the Melee team would like you to know. McFerguson says, how many different large-scale head judges have I had philosophical policy conversations with? I can't answer that question for you. You do the math. Gentle Giant 303 says Shatterpoint is so overrated. Gentle Giant 303, you're so overrated. Acefire RM says, have you read Bloodlines? Yes. Bloodlines also very good. Look, downstairs I have a shelf with all of the Legends canon novels. I love that. They're all great, except for Runes of Dantooine. That one's bad. The other 146 range from incredible, love them, read them every year, to I've read them and I'll reread them. And then Runes of Dantooine is just like, I will reread this once, but I will complain the entire time while doing it. Oh, McFerguson says, well, that comment was in reference to the concept of every event count being about experience learning, not just racking up a number. I mean, yeah, like, working a broader number of large events is great. Like, you get to have different conversations with a lot of people. I have some strong opinions on how events should be run. A lot of other large event head judges have different opinions. I think they're wrong because they're not my opinions, but that's how opinions work, and they're allowed to have those opinions. But I think it is possible that at a certain point, large event experience is going to be required for advancement. I don't think I require it for level 3, because for level 3, the goal is you're able to head judge a 128 player event, and you don't need to have worked a large event for that. But the details of what are the requirements for 3 and 4 and 5 will come with those levels. McFerguson says L3 is supposed to be able to head judge a planetary qualifier, floor judge larger scale. L2 can floor judge larger scale. So up to like long term, I think I want L3s as floor judges for galactics. But like regionals and sectors, L2s as floor judge because they know competitive policy. That's all we're looking for, right? But like figuring out the needs of the events is tricky. There's a whole cart horse sort of thing or chicken egg, all sorts of metaphors that you need to be careful about. There's a balance of making sure people have experience and have accessibility to that while not just giving levels to there needs to be, I think, some scarcity to levels, particularly the higher levels. There needs to be some demonstration of skill and knowledge, and a portion of that can be bypassed through repetition. Like if a person has worked one PQ and another person has worked 5 PQs and 5 sectors and 2 regionals and galactics, I'm going to guess that the latter is going to generally, not always, but generally be a more experienced judge. Mike Stone 12420 says level 3 should require experience at planetary qualifiers, but not higher. I think that's where I probably end up, but if L3 is also, you can now team lead at large events, I want folks to have experience team leading at an event and be able to get feedback before I can say you're able to do that all the time. Let's see. Quick tangent question. Favorite EU character? That's got to be like it's Jaina Solo, and there isn't really an argument for anybody else. Acefire RM says you saw my many shelves of books on Discord. Honor Harrington books are amazing. They are somewhere after the war with, I can't remember the name of the planetary system, but when that war, the first war finished, and they're like, okay, here's a new story arc, they lost me there. Gentle Giant 303 asks, are you going to make yourself a level 6? Nope, not going to do that. I'm going to make myself level 5, and by make myself, I mean I believe that by writing the exams and understanding enough the process to get somebody to level 1 and to level 2, I demonstrate my skill at that level, right? By being able to write the exam, by being able to proctor the exam and advance people to those levels, I'm demonstrating my skill in those areas. I'm not going to put myself above where the program is evaluating people. Gentle Giant 303 says, is there going to be a separate team lead cert or just rolled into the levels? I think generally I think what I will probably do is have branching certifications where it is not required for the head judge role that level prepares you for. And we'll start, I'm not skipping your question, or I'm skipping your question, I'll get back to it. In about half an hour, we'll start the lesson. But for level 2, you have the level 2 certification, and there is the certification branch of mentor, right? There is the mentorship certification. You don't need to be able to endorse level 1 judges and write excellent reviews to be a good L2. That is an above and beyond thing. However, it is something that I believe L2s can do, and it is a requirement for, I believe, level 3 judges, right? And so to get level 3, you need level 2, and you need to be a good mentor. Now you're level 3. At level 3, I don't think you need a team lead certification to get to level 3 to be a head judge of 120 player events. However, to be a very good team lead at large events, like sectors or regionals, I think that there's a separate set of skills that aren't tested by level 3. And so you have level 3, and you'll have your team lead cert. There's also the possibility, probably, I'll have another mentorship cert that's like, hey, like, as a level 3, you can make level 1s because you've done that process. You have the level 2 mentorship cert, but you don't have the level 3 mentorship cert. You don't necessarily know how to make L2s, although the skills in evaluating an L1 and an L2 are relatively similar. But essentially, my thought process here is that any certifications that are part of a level are explicit stepping stones in the direction of the next level, but are not required for what that level means. And this keeps the levels as clean as possible and carry as little baggage as possible. I want them, like, the purpose of levels is to communicate a judge's skill to tournament organizers. That is why levels exist. And if we start adding a bunch of certifications that tournament organizers do need to care about, that is problematic because it undermines the validity of these numbers mean things. And so if they're like, okay, I need to make sure that I have this many L3s with the team lead cert, or this many L4s, or XYZ, it starts to get a little bit complicated. So I don't know if there will be a team lead cert. It might be like, but I do think that it is very valuable to have a lot of stepping stones and be like, hey, just get these things. And once you do all of these things, like, you get the team lead cert, you get the mentorship cert, you get the, like, logistics cert, you get the investigation cert, and you get a conflict management cert. These are hypothetical. I don't know how to teach any of them. I don't know if there are going to be requirements. You now have all the prerequisites for level 4. You get an endorsement for level 4. You take the exam. You pass an interview. You're now level 4. And then there are a bunch of level 4 certs. And breaking it down so that it is easier to see how you can grow, I think, is very valuable. For levels 1 and 2, like, going from nothing to 1, nothing to... from 1 to 2, those gaps aren't huge, and I want to keep the gaps as small as possible so that you can feel like there's always some amount of progression. In other judge programs, there was a huge amount of difference in some older judge programs between one level and the next. Like, one level is, so like, our floor for L1 is head judge an 8-player casual tier event, and that's what it was there. L2 was head judge a 16 to 32 player competitive tier event, and that's about where we are here. Our level 3 is head judge a, like, 60 to 130 player competitive tier event, which is a pretty big jump up from 16 to 32. But 64 isn't that far away, and 128 isn't that far from 64. Like, it is a reason. There is a jump. It's not perfectly flat linear scaling. There is a jump, but it is an achievable jump. The next jump in the other older program from can head judge 120 players was can head judge, like, 600 to 1,000, and that's a very big jump. So we're gonna have can head judge 250 to 400, and then it'll be 600 to 1,000, and then it'll be more than that. At least that's how I'm currently envisioning things. Gentle Giant 33 says, conflict, we have to fight you to get that cert. No, conflict management means getting rid of conflict, not creating it. Wolfstar 562 says, I want to know your thought process when it came to figuring out teams and the people you put in the position you did. Like, was it based on what info was given to you? I can understand if there's no real answer to this question. I presume you are referring to the Galactic Championship schedule. Not everybody has access to that. One of the things here that I did here is something that I wouldn't normally do. One of the things that I have is a logistics team whose job is to handle end of round, pairings, deck checks, distribution, and any other significant logistical task that comes up throughout the weekend. This puts a lot of pressure on them to perform in that way, and it means that other judges don't get experience practicing deck checks, practicing end around, learning these systems. That team structure that I have for Galactics, is suboptimal for long-term growth of the judge program and long-term growth of judges. It is not ideal. However, what it does do is it allows me to put people who have a lot of logistical experience from other trading card games into, and not as much experience with Star Wars Unlimited, into a role where they can maximally leverage their logistics experience, and they are less likely to run into rules and policy questions that they don't have the expertise to answer. Then I take everybody who is Star Wars first, either like judging their first TCG, playing their first TCG, is a Star Wars Unlimited expert, and I make sure that I have those people out on the floor, because that's where they are most valuable. Then I have everybody on those teams cycle through the logistics team, so everybody gets some exposure to these ideas of deck checks, end of round, etc. on a large event. So I wanted to still give everybody some of that experience, but maximize the logistics experience of some judges and maximize the rules and policy knowledge of other judges. This Galactics is weird because, as I mentioned a minute or two ago, I want the floor judges for Galactics to be level 3s. The head judge of Galactics is a level 1 judge. The entire assistant head judge team, level 1 judges. Floor judges are level 1 judges. None of us are level 3 judges, and so we're operating with a degree of uncertainty, and I'm balancing out some of that uncertainty by utilizing people I know who are strong in certain areas in those areas, and doing a little bit less with rocks and reaches. Rocks and reaches is a term used in team development. Rocks are people that you can rely on. They're a foundation that you can build upon. Reaches are people who are... it's a little bit of a stretch for their development. It's like, I think you can get this. I think like if I give you no guidance, you'll get an 80%. If I give you a little bit of guidance, 90 is very easy, and I think you can nail it. If you have a good day and you get good guidance and nothing blows up in your face, 100% can do. However, if things go poorly and I'm not able to provide you the support that you want, you might be a 50% judge. Like, the range on a reach is broader, whereas a rock is like, I don't need to give you... So, as reference, the lead of my logistics team is Jared Silva. For those of you who don't recognize Jared Silva's name, Jared Silva is the organized play manager for Star City Games, which is the company that runs, or at least ran, sectors and regionals in the United States for Star Wars Unlimited, and has been running tournaments for decades. Jared is the judge manager for premier events for other trading card games. He has been the head judge of multiple 2,000 plus player events. Jared has... McPherson says ran past tense, is SCG not involved in season 1? No, I just don't know if they are. I know that they have run events previously. I don't know about the future. Saying that they are running them would indicate that they are. I don't know if they are. Saying ran, that is fact. I just don't know. I'd like to know, but I also wouldn't be able to tell you until it's announced. So, that one, that's just a language thing where I wanted to be precise and added confusion instead. So, I have Jared running my logistics. Jared has run more complicated logistics for larger events, and is somebody that I can just say, handle end of round, and then it gets handled, whereas there are a lot of newer judges who can run end of round. However, would want more guidance or direction than take care of it. Just saying, end of round and deck checks are your job. Ask me any questions. And some folks would ask me lots of questions, and that's perfectly fine. I love that. People, please ask me questions. However, I want to minimize the variance, and I know exactly what I'm going to get from Jared. For floor judges, the goal there is folks who will do a good job of supporting their team. A lot of the floor judge leads are people who are on their first TCG or are new to judging. However, the logistical burden on those floor teams is less intense. And one of the things that I believe is important to do is when you give somebody a new role, that you set them up for success. And having somebody balance complex logistical tasks and being new to the weird dynamics of judge leadership is something that I want to avoid. I want you to focus on one or the other, not doing both. Which is why I like using point people and leads for floor teams. Because if I put you as a lead for a floor team, your job is make sure your judges are having a good time and that your judges feel supported. And you help out when asked, but you don't have to worry about managing a task on top of that. As I mentioned in one of the previous videos, one of the previous lessons, a lot of judges focus on the task to the detriment of their team. And the team is 50% of the title of team lead. In fact, task completion doesn't come into the title of team lead. Although I'm probably going to switch to squadron leader because that just sounds cooler and is thematic. So we're probably going to be running squads for the foreseeable future unless somebody convinces me that squads are worse than teams for whatever reason. It's just going to take me a hot minute to get that language sort of like stuck in my head because I've been using teams for a decade. But squadron leader, so much cooler than team leader. But there are a lot of folks from Star Wars Unlimited that I've met through Star Wars Unlimited who I have not seen in leadership positions before. However, they have demonstrated the through my interactions with them and through the application, demonstrated that they are in a good place for an introductory leadership role, which is make sure your people have a good time. And so, bunch of people, some of them I've worked with before from Star Wars, some of them I've worked with before from other TCGs, and some of them I have not worked with before, but came recommended from folks from other TCGs or through their applications for leadership positions. Filling out the teams, I wanted to make sure that there was, if somebody was in a more of a reach team lead role, I wanted to give them somebody who's a little bit more of a rock. If someone was in a rock team lead role, I gave them somebody who could potentially be in their role in the future, a reach. And so I tried to make sure that there is generally 2 relatively experienced people on each team. And then at that point, since everybody's working the same task, it was assign people to teams, make sure that like you try to have some balance of experience across like Star Wars and TCG. So it's not like this team just has every judge who has only judged Star Wars and has not judged anything else, and this team only has people who have judged other games and aren't super familiar with Star Wars. I want to have a mix of everything. So that's how I built the schedule. Any other questions before we start the lesson? We're currently at 43 minutes on the introductory tangent. The deeper we've gotten into the L2 lessons, the more tangential these broadcasts have become. And I'm entirely okay with that. I want to be clear about that. Tangents, we're happy with them. Gentle Giant 303 says, is the longest tangent? Maybe. Like, I think we hit 20 minutes with the GIF tangent and subsequent tangents. But, yeah. Wolfstar 562, I get what you're saying. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to talk about this sort of thing. I think it's valuable to have these conversations. A lot of folks won't be building a schedule for 60 judges anytime soon, and so it's not directly practical advice and thought. However, I think that the philosophy of it can help inform your decisions when you're making a schedule or assigning people to roles for a planetary qualifier. Like, you have 3 floor judges. which one do you assign to be in charge of deck checks, which one do you assign to be in charge of end around, and which one do you not assign any tasks to. Think about this concept of rocks and reaches. Do you want the person that you've worked with before and has done deck checks for you before to run deck checks again so you know what you get? Or do you put them in charge of end around because you know that they'll be able to do well with that if once they get some exposure to it, and then you put somebody else in deck checks? Or do you put like 2 reaches in those roles and have your rock as your floor team member so both of them can lean on your rock as well as you? These things do apply at a different scale. So I think there is some value, like you can definitely interpret from it. And just understanding what your head judges are thinking, I think is very valuable. I know that a lot of judge programs and leadership structures for a lot of games are relatively black box. Just information goes in, and then there's a schedule, or an investigation was complete, there's an answer, and there's not a lot of insight to the internal workings. And I want to, like, the decision on how to deviate. A lot of people say that you should not talk to new judges about deviations because they will take the wrong lessons from it and deviate incorrectly. I think the only way to learn how to deviate is to do it incorrectly a bunch. That's how I learned how to deviate. If you just think about it a lot, you're not gonna actually learn from it. And if nobody ever teaches you, you're certainly not gonna learn from it. And so I think that, like, there's an amount of risk that you take by saying, hey, here's some things that you shouldn't do all the time. And some people will not hear the should not do part, and they'll do it anyways, or they'll misinterpret your instructions or the philosophy behind them, and things will be worse. However, I think that, generally speaking, judges are critical thinkers who are intelligent, who care about their community. And as long as those attributes are there guiding you, and you think about what you are doing, it is safe for me to give this advice. More good will come of it than harm, although some harm will come of it. Hedkin says, happy that it's titled. I mean, the GIF or the tangent, like, once a tangent gets a title, that becomes a problem with tangents. DFN Ray 369 says, can you quickly recap my tangent? Which tangent? The one that we've been going on today, or the one about Ray and other Legends of the Forest rules questions? MikeStone12420 says, know how the judges want to grow, assign based on this. Wolfstrider562 says, you want to put your best foot forward, but you also want to give others the chance to grow. Yep, there is this balancing act, as Gentle Giant says, of growth opportunity and event success. And some events, I'm willing to... there's a phrase of let your event catch fire a little bit, and there are some events where I'm willing for there to be a little bit more fire. Events that don't have coverage, willing to have a little bit more fire. Events that have been run before, so like doing a planetary qualifier, I've done several of those before, and I've done a lot of in-store competitive tier events of 60 to 120 players. And so if I set it on fire, I know how to put out the fire and get it back on track. Events that you don't want to set on fire are the largest event you've ever head judged, with a staff that is mostly judges you haven't worked with, even if you know them and are excited to work with them, with coverage that's the first of its kind and a very big deal for the publisher. And so we're going to experiment. We're going to set things on fire a little bit less in Galactics. Now, it'll feel like things are set on fire because it's July in Las Vegas, and so if something does catch on fire, it might take folks a minute to notice, which is helpful. But for some events, we're going to try and be a little bit more focused, a little bit less focused on growth opportunities. But like the next Galactics, if I am the head judge of the next Galactic Championship, I'd be willing to experiment a little bit more, presuming that this goes well. And the one after that, presuming the second one goes well, I'd continue to add just a little bit more and more experimentation each time, and a little bit more growth opportunity because I am more comfortable in that role. This one, I haven't done this before. There's some amount of nerves. I want it to go well, and so I'm going to lean on things that I know will work, at the cost of giving growth opportunities. Gentle Giant says 303. Gentle Giant 303 says, what about how Attack of the Clones is the best movie? Attack of the Clones, very good. I don't know if it's the best movie. Revenge of the Sith, very good. We'll start at 562 says, don't forget the tangent of which bird would be a Sith or a Jedi. Yep, that was a different tangent. Headkin says, sectors fire, GC probably not fire. I think PQ's some amount of fire, GC no fire. Sectors, we want to avoid fire. McFerguson says, are we going to have interim answers for the open pending policy and rules questions? I'm going to see if I can hunt down Ryan on Wednesday or Thursday and be like, hey, can I just get some answers out of you real fast for these so that we can have answers for these rules questions? Otherwise, I'm going to have answers, and I will just give my best guess. Policy, similar answer. Note that that is for things that are policy clarifications. Some number of the questions under policy clarifications aren't so much, hey, this is unclear or unambiguous in policy, but rather it is, hey, this feels weird. Is this what you intended? Or this seems to be missing. Can policy change to account for this? And that sort of thing. And while I can make decisions on what policy says, I don't want to create policy for FFG. Great. Any more questions as we come up on the 50-minute mark? Or can we get started on this lesson? Great. I gave you 2 seconds and there isn't any time. So we're going to get started on the lesson before you ask any more questions. So, what are reviews? Reviews are any sort of recorded feedback. I'm going to refer to reviews as written reviews. That's how I was raised on them. Just they were digitally written, not like on a sheet of paper with parchment and quill. I'm not that old. But digitally written, submitted, and then you have a history of them. However, if you want to do voice notes, or if you want to do like record a video call with a conversation with your review subject, that's a review. The value of reviews is that they are recorded. A lot of people say, I gave them that feedback, I told them that feedback in person, why should I bother writing a review? And a question that I have for you is, have you ever come to a match and you've needed to evaluate the board state and you're determining whether or not like a rewind is feasible, and you've asked the players, hey, who started with the initiative this round? And the players look at each other and they're like, I have no clue. Or like, who won last game? And they look at each other and they're like, honestly, not a clue. We're on game 3. Couldn't tell you who won game 1, who won game 2. If their memory fails them after 30 seconds or 5 minutes, you think that the judge is going to remember your specific feedback a week or a month later? Writing it down means that they can refer to it in the future, or that you can refer to it in the future. Reviews are a more long-term form of feedback than just sitting down and telling somebody, hey, you suck at these things, you're great at these things. It also allows it to be a little bit more considered. Oftentimes somebody will come up to me at the end of a weekend and be like, hey, how did I do? Do you have any feedback for me? And I'll be like, yeah, you were great at these things, but nothing has really coalesced in my head. And then when I'm able to sit down and actually write down a review, I'm able to say, hey, so your performance on end of round was spectacular. You were very good at these things, and I think that the reason you were good at these things was because of this underlying cause. However, I saw you struggle with confidence handling calls with regard to card manipulation error, and I think that that's due in part because of the lack of clarity surrounding card manipulation error in the policy. However, even on the most straightforward examples or scenarios, including one which was literally the cards named in the example in the policy documents, you read that and you're like, I'm not sure how to handle this. I think that that's something that you need to work on for these reasons and that sort of thing. As Hedkin says, writing it down makes it more actionable. Yep, like if I give you a course of action in feedback, I'm like, hey, you could try these things. Like, let's say I think confidence and how you present yourself to players is something that you need to work on. I could give you some advice of like practice with your friends, like have your play at your house or like at your local game store outside of an event. Have your friends call you over and have them be merciless. Like have your friends absolutely roast you. Have them mock you as you are giving the judge call. Have them do the SpongeBob camel caps, but with their voice to mock how you give the ruling, so that you get like condition yourself to just be like, I don't care how the players are reacting to me. All I am doing is issuing my ruling as confidently and as directly as I can. And then the next time when you actually get a real rules call and the players are polite, you're like, cool, I don't need to be nervous. It could be way worse. They could be SpongeBobbing me. I don't know if that's helpful. Hedkin says, you mean that's not how your weekly plays go? It's possible. I mean, for some people, that is how their local game store works. On the topic of certainty and nervousness, one of the first times I took a judge call, this was at one of my trial events. So my mentor, or one of my mentors, was playing in the event. I was the head judge of the event. I took a call at their table. Their opponent had a question about card in hand. I talked to them away from the table. I answer the question. I return to the table, and the player's opponent, my mentor, who is a very experienced judge, says, hey, can I talk to you away from the table for a second? And I'm like, oh, crap. I have done something wrong. And very nervous, very lacking a lot of confidence. And my mentor says to me, hey, I don't want you to confirm or deny anything. I don't want you to give me any information. However, I believe that my opponent asked you about interaction of card X that they have in hand, which I don't know about, so don't confirm that whether or not they have it, and card Y, which I have in play. I think the answer you probably gave was this answer for these reasons. However, that answer is incorrect for these reasons. So, I'm just telling you this in case you gave that ruling about that card. I don't want you to confirm or deny. What I want you to do now is go back to the player and ask to talk to them away from the table to explain what I just explained to you. But I want you to do that whether or not what you did was correct. And we'll talk about this afterwards. And, like, not only did my mentor have the soul read on what their opponent had in hand, but they knew the opponent asked the question, what answer I gave, why I gave it, why I was wrong, and what the correct answer. I was blown away. And after that point, I was like, okay, cool. So that's almost as bad as it can go. I've also, like, very early on, I gave a call where I was incorrect and it caused the player to lose a game. And I was like, oh, that's about as bad as it can go. And I went back to the player. I'm like, hey, here's why I was wrong. Here's everything. And they're like, oh, yep, understand. That makes sense. And I understand why you're wrong. No hard feelings. I get it. This is just weekly play. And I was like, oh, I don't have, like, I should strive for accuracy. Accuracy is important. But I don't need to have that level of perfection. Anyways, this is all to say, you give somebody some feedback of, try this thing out. And they might remember it, but they might not remember it. And you might not remember it. And so, like, a month or two later, and you work with them again at another large event, this is for somebody that you don't see regularly. This is somebody that you don't see at your weekly play every week, but somebody that you see at planetary qualifiers or something like that. And you come up to them and you're like, hey, how are you doing? And they're like, oh, I've been doing well. I'm struggling with X. And you're like, cool. I think we talked about that. I can't remember what I said. If you have a review, you can go back to that and be like, this is what I said. Did you try these things? It's for both your memory and their memory. Similarly, like if you talk somebody through the specific process of how to make tape loops or how to run end of round or how to build a judge schedule like we just did, having it in, like if somebody writes a judge schedule and you're like, that was a bad judge schedule, here's why, and you break it down where all the flaws in their judge schedule were and the things that they should consider in the future. If you just tell that to them, the next time they sit down and make a schedule, they'll probably strive to remember it, and they'll probably remember a fair chunk of it, but they might not remember all of it, and they probably won't remember the minutiae. They might just be like, right, rocks and reaches. Okay, how do I handle rocks and reaches? What is my reviewer's philosophy on that. It also lets you see growth. So like, imagine you're working with somebody and they're like, hey, I just do not get nested actions and modified abilities. No, modified actions and nested abilities. I can't say that right for the life of me. But you walk them through it. You give them some feedback. You're like, hey, check out these resources. Here's some puzzlers for you. Like, you give them the Ezra Leia Rebel Assault clone question with U-Wing reinforcements and a million resources, right? And you're just like, here's a puzzle for you. What happens here? And then in 6 months, you go to them and you like see them take a call and they're answering, like there's a real call of Ezra Rebel Assault and they just like sail right through it, no problems. Or there's like a question about like Kylo and Crate Dragon and they're just like, yeah, no problem. Like it's not the same question, but they clearly now have a much more commanding understanding of modified actions and nested abilities. And you're like, cool. Hey, remember how 6 months ago I said you were bad at this? Now you're better than me. Excellent work. Great job progressing. What worked for you? And reviews allow you to see that growth and measure it. And we'll get to self-reviews eventually. But self-reviews also let you see that growth in yourself. Wolfstar 562 says, would you say that writing feedback helps with keeping others accountable of actions they've done throughout events? There is some accuracy to that. However, accountability is not the mindset that I want folks to go into when writing reviews. Accountability, to me, at least the implication of accountability, is very directly tied to guilt and shame, right? Like you're accountable for things that have gone wrong. And it's not that I want to hold judges accountable for things that have gone wrong. It's that I want to educate judges and help them grow in areas of improvement. And that might sound very similar. Like the same goal is the bad thing doesn't happen again, right? But I don't want it to be that like, hey, you did this wrong, you should feel bad. You shouldn't do it again. I want it to be like, hey, this didn't go well. Here's what we can do to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. And so there's some language, like, I know that that's just like nitpicking on goal. But like, I think the language here is important. I think also there is absolutely some value in holding somebody accountable if you have that relationship with them. One, I think every judge should be able to hold me accountable. I'm a public figure and should be held to a higher standard than non-public figures. I don't love that I'm held to a higher standard just because I talk to y'all, but I think that that is accurate. And like, there are people who know me better, right? Folks who are my friends. And I would want them to hold me accountable. And doing so through reviews is a great way to do that. So that like, if I say, no, I am getting better at this, and they're like, Jonah, for the last 4 events we've worked together, I've written you a review for every single one, and you'll note that the first sentence in every single one is, you did the thing again. They're great, valuable, because we have that relationship where it's useful. If you start writing reviews for people that you don't have a strong existent relationship with that says, hey, you did a bad thing and should feel bad about it, or something that can be easily interpreted in that way, you're going to start burning a lot of bridges, and people are going to say, I don't want to work with you. I don't want to get feedback from you. This isn't valuable. This ties back into actionable feedback, right? You want to show a path forward and not be like, you're doing things bad, but how can we learn? This is a meritocracy, and folks who are better will get more opportunities. However, reviews aren't public. Reviews, by structure, are intended for the author and the recipient, and nobody else. Tournament organizers don't get access to your reviews. I don't get access to your reviews. Nobody gets access to the reviews that you've written or received unless one of the two of you explicitly shares it. And so being like, hey, tournament organizers, you shouldn't staff Jonah because he keeps on saying tap instead of exhaust. That putting that in a review, only I see that and I feel bad about it, but it doesn't actually change anything. Furthermore, judges shouldn't be... I don't believe that judges should be actively policing other judges' behavior. Like, you should not generally be going to tournament organizers and being like, hey, I think this person is a bad judge, you shouldn't staff them. Do not do that. If somebody does something that is dangerous or harmful to you, yes, please report that. But, like, don't try and get people not staffed. See if you can help them grow as a judge. If you're asked for feedback, like, give honest feedback, but don't try to undermine other judges. Okay, a bunch of questions while I've been chatting. Headkin says, self-assessments are the devil. I love self-reviews, and someday I'm going to get you to learn to love them too. For my advancement process and other judge programs, I probably wrote 40 pages of self-evaluation. I think that they are incredibly valuable if handled correctly. The format that I wrote my self-evaluations, which is me just writing a wall of text, very helpful for me. That form of self-evaluation isn't going to be helpful for everybody. Some other people would do much better to sit down and have a conversation with another person, or even just talk at another person and record their dialogue and be like, I had some epiphanies while talking at Jonah who was playing video games. That was very helpful. And I'd be like, good, glad it helped. MikeStone12420 says, you are accountable for your staff, not the staff accountable for learning. Yeah. Let's see. Heroes App says, are you going to implement any sort of feedback form we can use to give feedback about other people to be taken into consideration for the program overall? I know there's some stuff in place already, but something event-specific like SEG does after each event. Nope. That is not something that I plan on doing for a variety of reasons. One, most of the feedback we would receive would be critical. Straight up, people, it is a lot easier. So, when talking about feedback, the best way to guarantee that you get feedback from other judges is to screw something up. If you screw something up, judges will give you feedback on it. That is the number one way to get feedback. Asking for feedback, being specific about it, asking before the event, those all help. Screwing up guarantees that you will get feedback. And so if we have like a generic form of send us feedback, we would get a ton of negative feedback and very little positive feedback and reinforcing feedback. The second question is, what would we do with that feedback? Hi, I'm one person, and even if we expand the team to 2, 3, 5 people, there are 2,500 certified judges right now. We cannot individually mentor those people. If you think somebody deserves feedback, write them a review. The judge program and Cascade Games, our job is to educate the judge community, provide as many resources as we can, support the judge community as best we can. But we are not responsible for individuals. And we need to be very clear on that, and accepting feedback on individuals makes that border very, very blurry. Reading some more words. Wolfstrider560 says, I get it, accountables may be a harsh word, actions that can be worked on. Yeah, areas of improvement is the language that I use most frequently, because that's generally what it is. Also, areas of improvement doesn't mean you're bad at it. I think that my mentorship is an area of improvement. I could be a better mentor. Note that I am regarded by a lot of people as a very good mentor, and I'm mentoring a judge program, and a lot of people have become certified judges because of my mentorship, right? But it's still an area of improvement. I can still be better. Now, some things I might, like, my ability to go on tangents, that's not an area of improvement. There's no way that I can improve on that. But you can always drill down and find an atom in a subsection, and you're like, this is an area of improvement. There's always some amount of improvement, and I really like that. But so Cascade won't be accepting feedback on individual judges. If somebody does something to the point where they have broken like FFG's community code of conduct, report them to FFG. Again, that's not a thing that we are handling directly. There is that area of, I want to deliver this feedback to this person, but they don't know, like, I played in their event, I'm just a random player, they don't know who I am. I want them to be able to respect my feedback. How can I deliver that feedback in a way that will get them to hear it? Can I just send it to Jonah because everybody respects Jonah, and then Jonah passes it along to them, and then they accept the feedback and get better? I can understand that line of thinking. What I would encourage you to do instead, because I don't have the bandwidth to do that, and I think that it puts me in a not great position, is reach out to them directly, either finding their contact information, Discord or email, through Nexus, and being like, hey, I was at your event, or at the end of the event being like, hey, I was a player in your event, I have some observations, like you took a couple calls at my table, and I have some observations and feedback, do you mind if I send you a review? And I think most judges would be like, I would love that feedback, that would be great, thank you. If there is holistic feedback for the community, or for the judge program, like, hey, I've been to a bunch of events, and it seems like judges just don't understand that they should not be setting fires to players' cards if they're marked. I'd be like, okay, that is good feedback to know. Can you let me know, like, where these events are? And you're like, all over the world. I'm like, great. This seems like something that I need to focus education on. If it's broad scope feedback, I can use that. But specific individual feedback, I would not accept. Headkin says, I just hate self-reviews and self-evaluations because it feels like I'm being a narcissist, though only some of the assessments I've done, or the only assessments I've done are work-related. I think, when I write them, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, I'm maybe okay at this judging thing, even though it has been my career for the better part of a decade. But I think that, like, being honest about your skills and being comfortable with that is super valuable, not just for judging, but for life in general. And if you get to the point where you can be honest about your quality of yourself, Headkin, and I'm talking to you directly now, if you can write a review that is genuinely true and praises yourself and you're comfortable with that, I think you'll be a better person. This is where, like, the judge program and, like, going beyond a card game starts to be a thing. I think that self-evaluation can really help you. One of the things that, like, I discovered in my self-evaluations early on is that, like, my leadership and my presence, how I interact with communities, wasn't great. And that's something that I've worked on a lot. And I've learned how I engage and interact with groups, and how I interact with groups best, and what size groups I interact with, and where I find joy in things. And that has allowed me to say no to social encounters that I would not enjoy, because now I know that I wouldn't enjoy them and why I wouldn't enjoy them. And I can offer counters, being like, hey, I know you want to go do an escape room with 12 people. That sounds like torture to me. What if you and I went to, like, dinner and had drinks and just, like, chatted about the game instead? That sounds much better to me. And they're like, that also sounds great because I'm an extrovert and just want to spend time with people. But understanding where my limits are through that self-evaluation was good for me. Headkin says, man, this is cheaper than therapy. Are you accounting the money that you've spent on cards? Because then it might be more expensive. You think it's cheaper, but then you have to do the counting for the cardboard. Gentle Giant 303 says, Tim shows you can do even more tangents. I don't think Tim and I have ever gone on a 50-minute tangent, and that's where I started today. So I don't think Tim can help me, because Tim has deadlines, and I have fewer I need to be out of this room deadlines. Mightstone12420 says, unsolicited feedback is like pictures, don't send them without permission. Yep. Like, best practice, always just be like, hey, I have some feedback, do you mind if I send you this feedback? At the very least, let them know that you're sending the feedback before you send it. Just be like, hey, I had some feedback. I've written up a quick review. I'm going to send it over later today. Here's App says, I would also like to say, always remember to be kind when you give your feedback to others, requested or otherwise. Yep. Be respectful is the language I use, because sometimes with my friends, being respectful is not the same as being kind. Sometimes my feedback to friends is like, hey, you were a moron there. You know that, right? And they're like, now that you've pointed it out, yeah, I get it, and I see that, and that was a problem. Thank you for pointing that out. Now, I'm not going to go give that feedback to most people, because I don't have that relationship with most people, because that is not a respectful way to interact with them. But with my friends, that's an effective way to interact with them, and a respectful way. McFerguson says, judging has some income. I'm kind of breaking even-ish. I'm doing better than breaking even, but I've also been doing this for a very long time. Playing the game is where the expense comes in. Judging, you should be breaking even or doing better. So, we're still on page 1 of this lesson. We've been at this for a while. This has been one of my favorite broadcasts. I do enjoy just chatting at y'all. So, this is just something that I want to reinforce. I've mentioned a couple times during this broadcast. It's mentioned a couple times in the lesson. Evaluations, endorsements, they do not go on your permanent record. They're not accessible to anyone without them being directly shared by either the author or the subject. So, like, if somebody says, hey, you suck in a review, don't feel like you're not going to get hired because of that. Tournament organizers don't see that. I don't see that. Also, like, saying in a review, I think that you're better at rules than Jonah, I'm not going to see that. I'm not going to get mad at you and be like, no, I think I'm better at rules, right? Like, it is, if you're going to compare, I don't love comparisons to other people, but it can be useful to benchmark as, like, if somebody's like, hey, I want to be Galactic Championship head judge, be like, okay, well, these 5 people are the people who've had the role before. This is how you stack up against them in various categories. That can be a useful thing, looking at individual aspects and individual people. But you don't have to worry about people that you are referring to seeing them unless you or the subject share them. Now, if, like, you say, wow, you're so much better than Jonah at everything, and you're saying that to a friend of mine, they'll probably show it to me to rub it in my face, and so there is a chance that I end up seeing it, right? But, like, if you are writing feedback to your friend, and they're like, yeah, I want to be, like, they started judging yesterday, like, they played Galactics, and they're like, I saw the judges running around, I want to head judge Galactics, and I'm going to do it next year. You could be like, okay, so you failed the apprentice exam. I have some feedback for you on your rules knowledge, which is, you're not good enough yet. And, like, you can compare, or, like, your rules knowledge should be here, this is where it's at. And you can make those comparisons, which are helpful for some people in their evaluation, having specific individuals as benchmarks rather than more arbitrary number values. And the subjects that you're talking about aren't going to see them. So, why do we have this lesson for level 2s and not for level 1s? Why are reviews important for level 2s? So, we have the mentorship certification to endorse level 1 judges. But L2 judges are going to interact with a lot more judges than L1 judges. The vast majority of level 1 judges are going to be in-store judges. They are going to work pre-releases, weekly play, store showdowns, and maybe floor judge, like, a local planetary qualifier, at least for the time being. and they're not really going to interact with other judges. So they don't really need to know or think about writing reviews. I think it is a helpful practice for level 1 judges. I think that evaluating others helps you get better at evaluating yourself, and getting better at evaluating yourself helps you improve, and helping you improve helps you advance, if advancing is something you care about. If you're just happy being a level 1 judge running pre-releases, that is incredible. Those are the judges who make up the bulk of the judge program, the folks just running the events that happen multiple times every week. Yeah, those are the folks that are actually important to the program. The Galactic Championship head judges, that's one weekend out of the year, doesn't make the judge program go, doesn't make organized play go. The folks who run weekly play every week and answer the questions and make new players feel welcome, those are the people who make judge program go. Anyways, L2 judges are going to be going to planetary qualifiers. They're going to be running events that have a second judge on staff, whether it be an L1 for like an in-store like 30 or 40 player competitive tier event, planetary qualifiers, that sort of thing. And so once you start interacting with more judges, you're going to have feedback. How do you give this feedback? Furthermore, level 2 judges are going to make up a small portion of the judge program, and so they're going to start to become a focus of authority, right? Being able to provide, just because they are higher level, people will gravitate towards level 2 judges as community building point, like keystones, or as like, this is the person who knows Star Wars Unlimited the best in a 10, 20, 50, 100 mile radius. As I've mentioned before, my goal long term is 5,000 level 1 judges and something like 1,000 or 500 level 2 judges, right? Like 10 to 20% of the judge program being L2. And that makes it a relatively small portion. And because of that implicit authority in being the highest level judge in an area, you're going to be the keystone of the community. People are going to come to you for feedback. Being able to provide feedback in ways that is useful to people, that's important to have. So, what makes a review? Review is any recorded feedback. It can be written, it can be somebody asking a question and me ranting on a tangent for 5 minutes on a Twitch broadcast. It can be a voice memo that you save to your phone. It can be just like hitting record on a Skype call or a Discord call where you're going back and forth. Any of these things count as a review. Now, on Nexus, we currently only support text reviews. Adding other file formats gets a little bit hairy, especially with like storage limits. And if you ever want to submit a review for an evaluation for advancement, having it be in written form is much more accessible. At least I didn't, talking about Skype, at least I didn't say Mumble or Ventrilo, TeamSpeak. Those are long dead, I think. I know Skype is actually dead. But MSN, AIM, yeah, classics. God, what are the... I can't remember the name of the servers that I used to answer judge questions on, but yeah, there's... As long as it's recorded and accessible, it's a review. So, we have evaluations, endorsements, and eventually we're going to have accolades. I'm going to talk about accolades first because they're my favorite, and they don't exist yet, but I want them to exist. Accolades are short reviews. They're going to be capped in either word or character length, so like 50 words or less, roughly, maybe even shorter. And they're intended to be strictly praise and celebration of each other. And if a subject approves an accolade, it'll be publicly displayed on Nexus. I don't know how many of you have played Minecraft. Most of you already have. I know my audience. But they have just like a little random loading message on the home screen of every single one. I want to have accolades on like just under the nav bar on every single page, just randomly pulled from our pool of accolades. Just being like, Jonah said that Gentle Giant 303 has okay taste in books sometimes, right? Or like Jonah says that McFerguson knows the rules real good. Something along those lines. And just celebrating the community in that way. And like, whenever you're on a lesson, whenever you're like navigating through various pages, there's just a little thing that says something nice about somebody in the community. The subject has to approve it. So that like, if somebody doesn't say something nice, it won't get displayed. But if somebody submits it and you approve it, it goes through there. So, then we have endorsements and evaluations. Endorsements are used for the advancement process. An L1 endorsement is a prerequisite for the L1 exam. The L2 endorsement is a prerequisite for the L2 exam. I bet you can't guess what the L3 endorsement is for. It'll be for the L3 exam. Evaluations are everything else. If someone has asked you for an endorsement, but you don't quite think that they're ready, submit an evaluation. Work with somebody who taught you a lot. Write them an evaluation about the things that they taught you and be like, hey, the way you explained this was super valuable to me. You should use this tactic again in the future. Think somebody is close to excellence or like advancing in roles or is like ready to be a PQ head judge or something along those lines, but have a few areas of improvement. Write them an evaluation. Evaluations just cover everything. All right. Now we're going to talk about some review structures. There's the classic 3-part review, there are focused reviews, aspect reviews, and then we'll talk about self-reviews and self-evaluation a little bit. So 3-part reviews are probably like, if you've gotten a review at work, you've probably gotten a 3-part review, which is strengths, weaknesses, comments, or strengths, areas of improvement, positive, negative, summary. They are very straightforward. You talk about what the candidate does well, what they do poorly, and maybe some comments that tie the two together or be like, this is at an acceptable level. It is neither a strength or an area of improvement. These are generally a little bit more holistic, but they can be a little bit specific. And I generally recommend this structure to folks who are writing their first reviews because the premise of including both strengths and areas of improvement and some critical thinking is critical to writing a review that is helpful. If you just write a review that is critical, people are going to be, they're not going to respond well to it emotionally. If it's just positive, people will be like, why am I reading this? This is just making me like, this is just expanding my ego. I don't need that in my life. And if it's just like analysis of performance without evaluation of this is good or this is bad, or like this is how you stack up to standards, if it's just like this is what you need to do, that can feel a little bit unstructured. And just being like, hey, these are some things, it also encourages you to think more broadly about somebody. If you're like, hey, I'm going to write a review about this person because they did something that I thought was really bad and they need to improve at it, holding yourself to also writing something genuinely good about them where you're like, also, I thought that this was good, and here's why, and here's how this builds into your narrative, can be good. Wolfstrider 562 brings up the compliment sandwich. I don't call them a compliment sandwich because the compliments are the bread. It's what's in the middle that's the sandwich part. And so I call them crap sandwiches. I don't like those. Some of you have probably heard of them or received compliment or crap sandwiches before, which is, and Wolfstrider, I'm going to pick on you for this one just because you're the one who brought it up. But it's like, Wolfstrider 562, it was a pleasure working with you on the logistics team. There were a few areas where you could have improved, namely everything. You screwed up absolutely everything. You were bad at your job. You didn't show up on time. You were rude to players. And then you farted on me and left. Anyways, can't wait to work with you again. You're such a lovely person. That is obviously an exaggeration. And that is not true of Wolfstrider 562. None of those things I said were at all true. But it is the idea of a compliment or crap sandwich is start by saying something nice so they feel good, then give them the meat of what you want to say, and then close it out with something nice so they forget that you were mean to them a second ago. And I don't think that that's a particularly effective way of delivering feedback, because I think judges are smart and will sniff out all that crap in the middle and not pay attention to the bread of, oh yeah, it was great to work with you. However, if you say something along the lines of, and I'm going to pick on Wolfstar 562 again, hey, Wolfstar 562, it was great working with you. You brought a presence to the event that is super valuable. Whenever you were interacting with judges or players, I could see them just smiling. Like, you'd walk up to somebody after they had an intense call, and when you walked away, they were smiling and laughing. When you went to players, I saw them, like, in a deadlock, and then when you finished the call, they were joking and having a good time. You have this great ability to make people feel comfortable. However, I also noticed that you weren't quite aware of when you should use this power. You came up to me while I was talking with another player who I was in the process of disqualifying, and you tried to make them have a good time and did not pick up on the fact that I was disqualifying this player, and they were not receptive to that. So just maybe keep an eye open for the context of the situation and recognize that it isn't always the place for laughter and jokes. Again, not true examples, coming up with this off my top of my head, more slander for Wolfstar 562. But having, here's a strength, here's a weakness, it reinforces both. Like, if both of them are genuine, it makes the other feel more valid, right? If somebody just comes up to you and gives you a compliment and you're compliment averse, like I am, you'll just say thank you and ignore it. If somebody comes up to you and criticizes you and just says, hey, you suck at this, you're going to ignore it. If somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I've thought about this thing and you're very good at this, and also you're very bad at this, like the ego in me is like, oh, I like the thing that's good. If that's true, I have to accept the thing that's bad. And the humility in me and the shame in me goes, oh, the thing that they said that's bad about me, probably true. But if that's true, the thing that they said that's nice about me also is probably true. So I have to accept both parts. And that, like, having both parts be robust and genuine feedback makes it more likely that people will accept the whole package. Avoiding the compliment sandwich is, I think, very important. Just because it is used so rotely in corporate scenarios where it just falls flat and is not done well, because it's a lot of the times people delivering feedback in corporate settings don't have the subject's best interest in heart and don't have that ideal of respect at the core, respect and growth. They're just like, I want to solve the problem and you're the problem, not I want to help you grow. Headkin says also come off as passive aggressive. Yep, very much true, because you're like, it's just, I'm going to do the minimal like sugar coating to make this palatable, and then I'm going to just shove this pill in the cheese and shove it down the dog's throat. For those of you who haven't had animals, that's a great way to get them to just cough up some cheese later. Headkin says, which is worse than straight aggressive. Yep. There's a book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott, I want to say, which talks about this axis of delivering feedback versus being polite about it. And in the ideal world, you deliver the feedback and are polite about it. It's better. A lot of people think that it is better to deliver the feedback and be aggressive about it than not deliver the feedback but be polite. And then the worst place to be is be mean and not deliver the feedback and just talk behind the person's back. Wolfstrider 562 says most companies see you as a number and not a person. Yep. And most people in positions of leadership see you, like, I don't want to speak for managers, but a lot of them are just like, I have quotas that I need to meet, and you are not helping me meet quotas. One of the weird things about the judge program is that the leadership structure and the hierarchies are not constant. Yes, I've been head judge for a lot of Star Wars events. That's probably not going to change in the short term. But an example that I can give is, let's see, last month, in June, I worked, or May. In May, I worked for an event for Star City Games. Jared Silva was my boss. He was the one who handed me my check at the end of the weekend. This weekend, Jared Silva is going to be my subordinate. Very frequently in the judge program, because a lot of people do this as their hobby, and the judge programs across multiple trading card games do have this concept of growth and giving people their opportunities at head judge roles. And so I really do not want a monopoly on the head judge roles, and I am confident that within the next year or so, I will certainly not have a monopoly on them. There will be a lot of very good candidates for these roles. And then I will go from being head judge to appeals judge, and so I'll be answering to people who are answering to me. And then at a certain point, I'll just be like, hey, I want to have even less responsibility. Just have me on as a team lead, or have me on as just like a floor. There was some event I worked recently where I was a floor judge. I had no responsibility at all other than like answer judge calls. It was incredible. And somebody who very frequently reported to me was my team lead, and my head judges were people that I've had report to me. And so because the hierarchy isn't constant, there is a forced level of respect, because if you disrespect, like in a locked hierarchy, if you are always somebody's superior, if you disrespect them, they have fewer opportunities to push back against that because they have less power than you in a locked system. Whereas if next week they're your team leader, your boss, if you're disrespectful or unkind to somebody, they have that authority over you very shortly thereafter. And so because of the fluid nature of it, it makes it a lot easier to just be like, oh, right, you're a peer. We are all equal level. We are all working together. I want to make you better because it will make my experience better, and it will make your experience better. Let's work together to do that. Rather than, I'm going to tell you what to do because I'm in charge. Because that isn't always true. We'll start at 560. She says, Jonah's trying to make a galactic empire of judges. I see it now. No. Clones. Galactic Republic. We're the clones. The Venator is the favorite ship up there. I know there's a big old mural of Darth Vader back there. That's because they had the Lego set Sith murals. They haven't done Jedi murals. If I could have Obi-Wan over there, would 100% have Obi-Wan. I guess I could have gotten the Batman kits and done an Obi-Wan or like a Rex, but what I really want to do is actually get like an Anakin so I can have the mirrored Anakin and Vader, but that's a tangent. We're going to move on. So, we've talked about one of the 4 types of reviews that I was going to talk about. Oh boy. Next up, focused reviews. Focused reviews do what they say on the tin and not what I do. They take a particular interaction, skill, moment, and really just focus in on that. Sometimes a focused review can be like, hey, let's talk about that one judge call that you and I took. And I'm going to write 2 pages about that judge call. Sometimes it's writing about tape loops. Those are the examples from the lesson. You could talk about, like if you worked on deck checks with somebody, you could talk just about their deck checks performance and their sorting methods, right? You could talk about communication styles, or like just focus in on one thing and talk about that. You don't have to evaluate somebody from top to bottom across every single aspect. You don't have to say, here's your rules knowledge, here's your policy knowledge, your logistics, your communication, your community, your policy philosophy, your leadership, your logistics, your presence, your charisma, your teamwork, your diplomacy, your stress management, your conflict management, your self-evaluation. Like, you can just be like, let's talk about how you talk about triggers and the language that you use to talk to players about triggers. And those can be super valuable. One, because you get a lot of insight into them. But that focused insight, for me at least, allows me to extrapolate outwards. If I understand one small thing very well, I can build upon that. And again, it's just building a foundation. Be like, oh, I understand these other things about me. I can explain triggers very well, but I can't explain modified actions and nested abilities. Why is there this disconnect between the two? Okay, what's the difference between nested triggers and nested abilities, modified actions? And so focused evaluations are super helpful. they're also incredibly helpful if there's a thing that you know that you're struggling on. If you're like, hey, I know that my announcements suck. Can I get feedback on just my announcements? And having somebody follow you around for a day on sides as you start a bunch of scheduled side events or on-demands and gives you feedback, you can be like, just after every time I start an on-demand draft, tell me how I did and what I can do better. And the person takes notes and they give you a review at the end of the weekend being like, hey, this is how you started the weekend, here's where you ended, here's the growth, and here's where I see you going next. And that's a very focused review, and it helps you get better at the thing that you want to get better at. And that is just so helpful, having somebody who focuses on the thing that you care about. Or if you're just like, hey, here's a thing that I care about, let me talk about this person's skill at that. I want to understand how they're so good at it. Or this is something that, like, I love running end of round. I don't understand why this person struggles managing this task so much. Let me evaluate what they're doing and talk to them about my thought process and see if I can understand where they are falling down so that I can better understand this thing that I do. Then we have aspect-based reviews. Aspect-based reviews are focusing on an aspect of a judge. This is different than like focus reviews can be aspect based, but a lot of aspect based reviews go across multiple aspects rather than a singular one, whereas a focus review would more likely focus on a singular aspect. The aspects aren't yet listed on Nexus. This is something that I want to do. This is another August after L2 exists goal. But the aspects are things like broad aspects are leadership, logistics, rules and policy, right? Those are broad aspects. And then like narrow aspects would be like investigations, card counts, team leading, mentorship, evaluation of other judges versus development of other judges. Some people are very good at teaching but are bad at evaluating where judges are. Other judges are very good at evaluating where somebody is at but very bad at developing them. And so just breaking down everything judges do and applying a label to it and giving you a set of language, a toolbox of language to refer to things that a judge does is incredibly helpful in giving feedback, because you might be, when you are evaluating judges holistically, you are probably thinking of the aspects that I am thinking of, but you might not have the words for them. Or if you do have the words for them, you think about them differently than I do. And so when we talk about leadership, what does that mean exactly? And at some point I'll have definitions for them. There's a chance that I break them down into the categories of heroism, villainy, vigilance, aggression, cunning, and command, but I don't think they quite line up neatly enough. And while that's cute, I want it to also be functional, because it is a communication tool, and the goal of communication tools is function. That brings us to self-reviews. Self-reviews aren't so much a structure as a subject. They can be composed in any way. They can be aspect-based, they can be focused, they can be tripartite, they can be holistic reviews where you're just like, let me talk about myself for pages. But they are an evaluation of yourself. Something that I want to stress is self-reviews are not solo reviews. You don't have to write it on your own. Writing it on your own, very good, very helpful exercise. However, you can be like, hey, I think I'm a great leader and very diplomatic and very tactful. What do you think? And you ask your friends this, or your mentors, or your peers, because some things you're not the best judge of. It is very difficult to accurately judge how you are perceived by other members of the community. I don't know. I think I have an idea of where I stand with the judge community right now, what my presence is in the judge community, but I don't know, because I'm not a part of the community that is evaluating me. I am the rest of that equation. And so I can't know what the community is without people telling me. The way I find that out is by asking folks who are a part of that community, or talk in areas where I'm not present. Now, only using other people's evaluations and doing no critical thinking on your own and no consideration, not including any of your own opinion, does undermine a self-review. It's not as valid. You do want to have some self-evaluate, like some solo evaluation in there, or some solo thinking in there. Self-evaluation, self-reviews becomes more critical the more you move along your judge path. Imagine for a moment you are a level 5 judge, or a level 4 judge, and you're just head judging your local planetary qualifier. It's the same store that you've been judging at for 4 years now. It's where you started judging Star Wars way back in the year 2024. And the TO has been there the whole time, but they just like sign up for the event. They don't really pay attention to it. They haven't watched you judge an event since the very first one you did in October, or in like for Twilight or Jump to Lightspeed. So they don't observe you at all. They're just like, yeah, just take care of it. I trust you. And you're working with 2 new L1s. They might be able to give you some feedback, but if you're working on your own and you're this L4 who's been judging for 4, 5, 6 years, you're going to be the person who best understands where you made errors, and where you can grow. And this applies even at larger events. If you're the head judge of sectors or regionals, chances are you are if not the most qualified judges in the room for that role. There probably aren't a ton of people at, say, a regional championship who are qualified to be head judge of a regional qualifier. And so at the higher levels, if you want to continue to grow, you need to learn how to evaluate and review yourself and give yourself actionable feedback and paths forward, because other people aren't going to be equipped to do it, because they're going to watch what you do and they're going to be like, wow, that was an incredibly impressive investigation. I've never seen somebody be that thorough in investigation. I've never done an investigation before. And you're like, that investigation took 38 minutes. That was 37 minutes longer than it needed to be. That was a terrible investigation. Hedkin says, junior versus senior versus principal engineer. Yes, exactly. There is some hierarchy, and understanding how to evaluate yourself is key to continued growth, because you're going to get to the point where you are the most experienced judge of the room, and other folks don't have the knowledge to give you meaningful feedback. They can still give you some feedback, and you can also get meaningful feedback, especially on things like relating to perception. If somebody's like, hey, you seem kind of cold and distant, that's meaningful feedback, because that's not something that you can observe yourself. Whereas like, hey, that deck check was really good, and you're like, that deck check was a travesty, and I'm kind of ashamed that you saw it. Wolfstar 562 says, try to be honest about what you bring and don't have a big ego or be too hard on yourself. Yeah, and that is not an easy task. A lot of people will either skew towards having too much ego or be too hard on themselves. There's the class of people who believe, like myself, everything short of perfection is irrelevant, and there's the class of people who believe everything I do is perfect. And both of those people are wrong. And figuring out how to balance those two is really difficult. If you learn that you're a everything I do is perfect person, and you're like, okay, let me try this, everything short of perfection is irrelevant, that'll start to feel real bad real fast. And if you're the other type of person, if you're starting with everything short of perfection is irrelevant, and you're like, okay, let me put on this attitude of everything I do is perfect, there's a very real chance that you just stop growing because you're not actually evaluating yourself. And you need to find that narrow band in the middle of where your self-evaluation is helpful to you and actually helps you grow. We talked about aspects a bunch. All right, going to talk about the risks of reviews. This is the final subsection on this broadcast. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. See if you can get me talking for another 11 minutes and push this one over 2 hours. But what are some of the challenges of reviews? As mentioned, reviews can be asynchronous and can feel a little bit more impersonal. If you write and send a review and that's the whole of your interaction, were talking about before, the subject can feel a little bit off guard. Talk to them first, let them know that a review is coming, or ask them for permission to send them feedback. Either works. There is some danger in being like, hey, can I send you feedback, to somebody who's like, everything I do is perfect, because then they never get that critical feedback that they desperately need to hear. And if they just say, no, I don't need that feedback, I think I did good enough. If there's somebody who wants to grow and to get new roles, you might just be like, hey, I'm sending you feedback because you need to hear this, right? Again, feedback should always be sent with the goal of helping that person and being respectful for that person, not for your own benefit. The other is just having conversation about that feedback before you send the feedback. Having conversation at the event or shortly after the event, super valuable. There's also the issue that it can be very easy to be disingenuous or not be yourself in a review, because you are writing this. A lot of people write their reviews on like flights back from major events or like in their hotel room. And sometimes if you're striving to hit both positive and negative elements, you might push the truth of your perception a little bit. Or if you're trying to convince somebody of your perception, you might just exaggerate things a little bit to be like, hey, I need you to pay attention to this. You might be harsher or more direct than you usually are in conversation. Again, this is because even though we know we're writing for a real person, a person that we talked with earlier in the day, or earlier in the week or weekend, there's an amount of social and cultural conditioning that changes how people write on the internet when their subject isn't directly in front of them. And because it's asynchronous, you might feel subconsciously that like you can be a little bit harsher because you aren't saying it to their face. And so they can, if they respond poorly to it, they can hide that, or they can spend time thinking of a response. And so it is very important to just be aware of what you're saying to the person and keep it in line with what feedback you would actually deliver. But that's about it. Thank you all for joining me. Recommend, as always, writing reviews. Reviews are great. You can just search somebody up on Nexus Judge Search, click on them, and there'll just be a little write review button, and you'll be able to write an evaluation. This is RoboJoe says written feedback always takes some interpreting. It always does, which is why I encourage conversations. Something I frequently do is just be like, hey, I just finished up writing a review. I'm going to like copy it over and send it in. And then we can talk about it after you've had a chance to read it. I know that you're at work, or it's like 2 p.m. and so there's a chance that you're at work. I'll be available tonight until this time, or I'll be available at some other time. Just let me know when you want to chat. This is RoboJoe says oftentimes they can be overly generous. Yeah, there's I know that some games require reviews after pretty much every event from everybody in leadership. And what happens there when reviews are required is they become, just my understanding from people who participate in that program, is that it becomes just like, wrote, you did a good job and I would be happy to work with you again. Just like inoffensive, not real feedback. Like no constructive criticism, and honestly, no constructive praise either. And by not making them required, generally speaking, I hope that most reviews that people submit have that mix of criticism and praise. And why I encourage that 3-part model for folks starting off. Having constructive criticism, having genuine praise, and then some overall analysis of this is RoboJoe being like marking all 5 out of 5s, and you're like, no, I definitely sucked somewhere. Yep, absolutely. I think I generally want to avoid like, there's some places where like scoring people on things is very helpful. I think it's more valuable at the higher end when somebody's doing like a large comprehensive review. But like on a weekend, like if somebody's writing a review for an event for a weekend, I think that it is not correct to just be like, yeah, like rules knowledge 5 out of 5, logistics, policy, and then like interactions. Like, I don't love rating folks on a star-based system on a single event. Sometimes somebody has a bad weekend, and just those numbers feel bad if you don't like. 3 out of 5 should mean adequate, right? 3 out of 5 should mean this is serviceable, but our culture has gotten to 5 out of 5 means you're passable, 4 out of 5 means danger zone, and anything below 4 out of 5 is absolutely unacceptable. Like if I'm looking at reviews for something online and it has 3 stars, that's not a good review. And breaking away from that is very hard. But yeah, Hedkin says numbers require rubrics. When I write about the aspects, I want to also write rubrics for every aspect, expectations for levels 1 to 5. I might start with just apprentice L1, L2, and then as L3 comes out, or before L3 comes out, or after L3 comes out, but around L3, add L3, and then L4 and 5. But I also prefer, rather than numerical values, assigning language to them. Language that I'm used to is major deficiency, or like deficient, area of improvement, adequate, strength, exemplary. And like major deficiency is this person should not do this thing. And excellent is this is top 1% of all judges. So like 5 and 1 stars should be extraordinarily rare in this system. And a lot of people should have a mix of not good enough. Like this is an area of improvement. You should get better at this before you are adequate. And then this is a strength. This is a reason why you should be promoted, why you should be this level. You are above adequate. You're above where the standard is. But that is more program construction philosophy and not something that I've fully fleshed out. Wolfstrider 562 says Jonah tangents are 4 out of 5. Room for improvement in staying on track 1 tangent. I think the fact that I go on tangents and then return to the earlier tangents is evidence of my exceptional ability with tangents. With that, I'm not seeing any other questions in chat. Thank you all for joining me. This is the last live broadcast for the level 2 lessons. There's not going to be a broadcast on Friday because I will be working in Vegas on the Galactic Championships. I might run a broadcast on Tuesday after I get back, covering the short videos that are coming out regarding the level 2 process, advancement, and endorsements. And I'm going to try and continue to do live broadcasts weekly just as like Q&A sorts of things. It might swap to like bi-weekly until we start having more content. Again, I might also, there's a bunch of stuff that I want to push out. So various updates, like if I push out a rubric, I'll probably just be like, hey, here's a rubric. Let's talk about like the rubric for level 1 today, the rubric for level 2 on Friday. Hedkin says, can we get a post-galactic stream? That, maybe. I have historically chosen to not speak directly regarding my experience as head judge for other organizers because that is me doing work for somebody else. I do recognize that it would be super valuable and super interesting for a lot of people. I want to make it so that it is not an expectation that head judges have to be publicly debriefed, especially for these larger events. If there's a controversy, I'm not going to talk publicly about that. And so, like, if there's a controversy, probably no stream. Almost certainly no stream, because that's what people are going to want to talk about. If there isn't a controversy, there's a possibility. But with that, I'm going to get out of here. I'll see a bunch of you in Vegas. I'll see a bunch of you next time I stream. And I'll talk to you later. Have a good one.